population figures are worrying. Our birth rates have been falling due to the rising trend of married couples having fewer children and more Singaporeans remaining single. This implies that there will be less working adults to support the elderly, and we need to address these concerns.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Over the last few years, the government has introduced a slew of measures to promote marriage and parenthood. These ranged from the famous baby bonus to longer maternity leave to tax relief for parents and improving childcare. Now, beyond these efforts, a supportive environment for work-life balance and pro-family practices are important. But marriage and parenthood are very personal decisions. Or what can the government's role be in this? Should there be more done to help couples who want to get married and have children? What are the financial considerations in starting a family? How can we transform the attitudes in workplaces so that we can be even more family-oriented? Singapore's birth rates have been below replacement levels in the last 30 years. In fact, marriage itself isn't even a priority. Some are not even thinking about getting married. Minister, what are your thoughts on these issues?
Well, it is true that getting married, having children are very personal decisions. Each one of us will have to make the decision to get married to someone and to have children. But collectively, individual decisions will impact the future of Singapore. So if we are delaying marriage, delaying parenthood, having fewer children, or not getting married, not having children at all, it has implications for us as a society. Children today will be the basis of Singapore. And we would like Singaporeans to think about this issue seriously. So while it is a personal and private decision, government is obviously concerned about the future prospects of Singapore. When the baby boomers retire in 10, 15 years' time, who will be there to take over the jobs in Singapore? How many Singaporean babies will then carry on for us to support the earlier generations? So if we are not replacing ourselves, then obviously the prospects for Singapore will not be as bright as before. We need to do what we can to assure Singaporeans that the government is here to support them on their journey towards parenthood.
So, Minister, taking from that point, being a professional matchmaker and being on the ground, I've heard a lot of singles saying to me, marriage is a very personal issue. Why is the government taking such a personal interest in this?
It's like us when we are in our 20s. Even our parents asking us to get married will sometimes evoke a very strong reaction from us. It is not for us to interfere, but we like to remind Singaporeans about priorities. Very often, we tell ourselves that, yes, if only I have gotten married earlier, I would have more children, have them younger. And these are some of the little regrets that we have in life. And we find ourselves telling our younger colleagues that, hey, you should really start earlier. And this is what we're doing. We're reminding them. There are certain things that's time-sensitive, and they need to apply their minds to it at an earlier time.
Minister, during Chinese New Year, when my aunties used to remind me, it never works, no? So I'm just wondering, if it's so personal a decision and you feel so as well, shouldn't government just stop reminding?
I think when all of us stop discussing it, then it sets a norm. If there is silence in a society, then they will take the cue of what is important of that day, which is career goals. We need to remind them sometimes that there are things more important than just work. Family, ultimately, is what makes us whole.
Working with other matchmakers from different parts of the world, they are actually very envious of what our government has done. They are like, wow, you actually have so many different schemes to encourage more singles to date. And we see the difference because in Singapore, singles are actually more open to actually using third-party services.
But just for curiosity, how big is your clientele in Singapore?
In Singapore, like we are about 60 to 80,000.
quite
We
a
have
lot of
different
people.
platforms. We have one-to-one dating, we have online, and now we have a mobile dating app as well. Yes.
Do you see that the Singaporeans, like your customers, have very high expectation? Is there a disconnect between reality and ideals?
We cannot generalize to say all single Singaporeans have very high expectations. That's why they are not getting married. I would say different singles have different challenges. Some singles work in a very, I would say, gender-biased sort of workplace.
Yes,
So, for
yes.
example, for like teachers, most teachers are ladies. So, if you're a lady teacher, it's
Yes.
quite difficult for you to meet someone.
Yes.
But I do see a trend that's getting more and more worrying for us as well, which is the older single ladies. They have been doing very well in their career, so they would have certain expectation of their lifestyle because they have a good education, they are earning very well on their own. So if they are looking to get married, they are looking to meet someone who is on par or better than them. I remember this couple, they're actually the first couple to get engaged through us. This lady is actually a lawyer. When we first made this match, she was very reluctant to go on the date. The reason for that is because the guy is actually an entertainer. So when I say entertainer, he actually do unicycling and juggling and things like that.
Right.
Yeah, and she's like, I'm a lawyer. What
Yes.
do I have in common with this guy? You know, why are you making this match? We believe that having interests and hobbies that are similar, all these things are not so important. More importantly, they must have similar values. So having met both of them, we felt that it was a great match. So we had to talk to this lady so many times. and after they met, in their own words, they say they got on like house on fire. And very quickly, they got
Yes.
engaged in 3 months, and at the
See.
first date anniversary, they got married. And I think, what is very heartwarming about this story is if they have not stepped out of their comfort zone
Yes.
and join an agency or just do
Yes.
something out of their comfort zone
Take
to
a
meet
risk,
someone.
take a chance.
Yes, they would not
Yeah.
have met because they
Yes.
come from such
Like
different
your
backgrounds.
suggestion.
Yes.
You should train all the aunties. You should train all the aunties,
Aunties?
so that you don't nag their nephews and nieces.
Okay.
But instead tell them you must find people with the same values, you know. That would be sound advice during Chinese New
This
Year.
auntie has this advice that you should just set aside Friday night as date nights.
I meet so many single ladies, and sometimes I ask, so what do you do on the weekends? And I remember this lady, she tells me, on Saturday, I do my laundry. On Saturday night, you do your laundry, go out. And she's like, I have to wash my clothes. Now what am I going to wear for the next week, right? It's very practical.
Yes, yes.
And I'm like, Prince Charming or your Mr. Right is not going to jump out of the washing machine.
You're used to your colleagues in the company. Maybe they're all taken. So you need to get out of
Yes,
the environment
that's very
that you're
important.
used to.
That's what I always tell them.
Yes.
Even if you take that step out and you do happen to meet someone, but then you would have other considerations as well. For example, your career, your savings, and then the cost of a home purchase. For example, myself, I was at crossroads when my boyfriend then he proposed to me because I didn't know whether to give up my career in acting or not. I have this idea that maybe if I get married, there wouldn't be any more roles for me. That was why I was hesitant.
Life as a couple is for us to make. Some of the young people these days, they tend to want life very much established. I already want a house, I already want this and that. Everything's ready before we settle in and get married. We can actually build a family together.
I think it's the expectation as well. In the past, there's a Chinese saying which is that 成家立业. That means
You have
build
to
your
成家
family
first
and then you
before you
establish
立业.
your career.
But now
I
this
think it's
seems
the
to be the other way around, yes.
Yes.
And me and my wife, we decided to get married. I was on a graduate scholarship, so I was still getting a stipend. And my wife, she was still working, so she had a little bit more money. When we first got married, we didn't have a house. We had to decide between my parents' place and her parents' place. Kind of embarrassing for men to stay in the wife's place. At least my parents had a hard time with that. But I mean, it would make more sense because she would have to go to school very early in the morning. So I ended up there until we were able to.
How many years were you staying in your in-laws'
Well, we were fortunate we stayed about just under a year. By then, we were able to find a house right next to my mom's place.
Oh,
so we were able to
wonderful.
have
That's a good
a
arrangement.
kind of good arrangement. But I think at that point of time, we were kind of calculating, should we get a home as soon as possible? Should we just delay? I mean,
Yes.
some of the plans.
So you decided to just get married and see how
Yes,
things go.
and how things go.
Yeah.
And even when it came to a kid, we thought about it. We said, hey, maybe we could delay this and get the perfect opportunity.
Yeah.
A lot of people who want to have children later and they're not successful. And we said, hey, if it's possible to have one at this stage, let's have one. And earlier would be the better. But we didn't have all the perfect numbers.
Yes.
you could make it work out.
So you adjust
You
as you
adjust
go.
it, yeah.
And Jeff, what about you?
My wife and I were of the same age. We got married at very young, 25 years old. If you told someone today, it's like, it's impossible. Choices were limited by our finances back then. And finally, we found a place that is not really accessible at Bedok Reservoir. Basically working 2 to 3 jobs just to make sure that we are able to build a house. The house was empty to begin with. I remember then we built the house like furniture by furniture every month when the salary came in. Took us about 10 years before we upgraded to a bigger flat. That was when the kids came along. Having even interacted with some of the young people, their expectation of the ideal house, the ideal wedding video, it's pretty much mismanaged by what they see. We discuss about reality and ideals. We just need to equalize that.
There have been a lot of people who have been quite critical as well of the government for using financial incentives to get people to have babies. They're saying, okay, look, it's more than that. But in your case, for people who want to have kids, financial help is important.
Those are just the icing on the cake. Ultimately, to want to have a child, it should be motivated by all these additional bonuses. Of course, if there was external help that came along, I think a lot
helpful,
of
right?
it's helpful.
It's helpful.
It's helpful.
So I think incentives, I believe, is a consideration for many couples, but I do not think it is decisive. So even for a couple, children is about the future, how they feel about the future.
Yes.
Are they confident?
Yes.
Is there hope?
Yes.
Once you have that, and that comes with being able to build up to a certain level of your career, of your home, having a little bit of cushion, you feel good about the future, then you have a kid.
You need to
It's
be
actually
assured.
very reasonable to think like that.
None of them got married and started having children for the country, right?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So we have always maintained that this is a personal decision. Right? We can't tell you what to do in your lives.
I didn't feel very assured because back then, when I purchased my house, I had to pay a hefty sum of a COV, cash over value. I was thinking about my career and all that, so I was really hesitant to have a kid. When the kid came along, my savings was actually pretty low, but we managed to share this responsibility financially, and also at the same time, actually, I was really blessed because of the baby bonus that came along. So it really gave me a push. Yes, let's have this kid. Yeah.
Okay, no pun intended, right?